45 years, 0 name changes, new offices, more staff, improved technology to better serve you. Education, services, investments. Think real estate, think Marshall Reddick. Brokerage, property management, private lending, creating financial independence through real estate since 1979.
Perfect. Looks like you guys can hear us loud and clear, so we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. I'm Cameron, if you don't mind checking on the next slide for me, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Hi, folks. My name is Chris Carlson here. I'm an advisor with Marshall Reddick, here to discuss with you guys some of the deals that we see at the end of the year and why December and January are going to be a tremendous time of year for you guys to add another property to your portfolio. But first off, just a little bit about myself. I've been in real estate since 2013, 2012, really. I've been licensed as a broker. I've bought and sold properties in multiple states and own investment property myself personally and invest in the mortgage fund. I've been blessed to assist clients with expanding their portfolio and being a part of Marshall Reddick, which really focuses on education, like tonight's webinar. And I'm really excited to share some really fun and interesting strategies and techniques that we see in today's market with you guys. But first things first, if you all haven't heard of Marshall Reddick, here's a quick breakdown on what we do. But the real sauce here is that we're a one-stop shop for real estate investors. So what that means is we provide 4 distinct services. Our real estate brokerage, we supply agents that are trained to help investors acquire really fantastic deals, and they're trained to underwrite deals, look for on-market and off-market properties. We've done nearly 600 transactions here in 2024. The vast majority are for investment real estate acquisitions and investment sales. But without that, nothing really runs without a great property manager. I think if any of you here on the webinar have purchased real estate before, you probably know that maybe 5–10% of it is finding the right property in the right market and the right deal. But the other 90% is you owning that asset for the next 10, 20, 30 years and squeezing every dollar you can out of it. So our property managers, we manage 3,000 properties across 5 different states here at Marshall Reddick. And our property managers are looking for opportunities to reduce vacancy, reduce expenses on your property. And thirdly, we have a private money lending team. So we work with a lot of great real estate investors that are professionals that do need access to liquidity and funds so they can buy their next deal. And we lend money to those folks. So if you're a flipper, wholesaler, developer, or just looking to invest through maybe your self-directed IRA account, we can assist you with that. And then on the flip side, we have an investment fund. So we raise capital from our capital partners to lend money out to our private money borrowers, and our capital partners in the fund get a really nice healthy return of 8.5% a year. Cameron and I are both investors in our mortgage fund. It's a very safe, stable, conservative way. You get to be the bank, so it's first lien position. And we collect a nice healthy interest rate and just quarterly distribution.
Yeah, the way I like to say it is just like you can own a real estate property and collect a rent check, you can own or invest in the mortgage fund and collect the mortgage payment.
Exactly. We also are established across 5 different states, like I mentioned. We have offices in all of these different markets, and it's no accident. And how we discovered which offices we want to start it up in Texas, Tennessee, and Florida, Kentucky, and California. So if you want to go to the next slide here, Cameron, we'll talk a little bit about how we select our markets. So we're choosing our markets based off of these factors. The job market, vacancy rate, economic diversity, housing affordability. We need states to be landlord friendly and strong education, and of course, reliable property management for us to even entertain the idea of starting an office in that market. It needs to be a good market for investors where we can see long-term appreciation. I really like to focus on economic diversity as a key core component. These are all incredibly important factors when analyzing a new market, but economic diversity is really essential. We want to make sure we have a variety of employers there across a broad range of industries like housing or medical, transportation, tech, government services, and of course housing affordability we think is a primary factor. Those that are in California or across the western or eastern seaboard are facing really challenging times when it comes to housing affordability and investing in real estate. and markets like Texas and Tennessee allow for an entry point where we see a lot of runway for future appreciation and growth because people are still moving to those markets and there's a lot of demand out there. We love showing this picture because it really illustrates all of the folks that are hard at work at Marshall Reddick, optimizing your portfolio, like our property managers, our real estate agents that are searching for great deals, and our in-house analysts that are underwriting deals for the investment fund and doing private money lending. We have a marketing team. We just a lot of folks here that work really, really hard every day to help our clients at Marshall Reddick. So these are our different offices across the country, really. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Here's the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to do a little market update for December 2024, why we think now is the time to strike for your next investment purchase. And just comparing single family versus 2 to 4 units, there's different opportunities with each asset class and why you might want to choose single family over a 2 unit or vice versa. Forward commitments are a big factor here and why we think now is a great time to buy. And we're going to talk the definition of a forward commitment here shortly, cliffhanger. And we're going to look at, why or how to acquire properties in new construction developments and what strategies you want to implement when you're doing that, and why we think new construction is a great way to build your portfolio, and the pros and cons of investing in the suburbs versus inner city. And after that, we'll teach you all how to schedule a consultation with us if you want to dive further into how we can assist you. But just what we expect from you guys is to take notes, ask questions in the chat, write down anything that you want to chat with us about in a consultation. You can reach out to Cameron and I, and sit back and relax, and hopefully you guys will learn a couple things.
Absolutely. And if you miss anything or want to go back, we'll send you the presentation video as well as slide deck within 24 hours too.
But without further ado, I'm going to let my unrelated colleague here, Cameron Carlson, take over and introduce himself.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, unrelated, but cool coincidence that Chris and I both have the last name Carlson. Little about me. I'm a realtor here in Orange County as well. I graduated from Vanguard, so for those of you who know like Costa Mesa area, you probably know Vanguard University. I own my primary here, and I have been happily married for almost 2 years now, and my wife and I are expecting. So if you see that top right photo, you'll see my wife and our sweet little girl on the way. We're actually due in January, so that's right around the corner. I love to play pickleball. So on that other photo, you'll see, maybe you can kind of see Chris and I there in the middle, but we actually join in pickleball tournaments, and we like to get competitive with pickleball here at Marshall Reddick. And we like to, play in some fun leagues. So I thought it'd be fun to throw that photo in. I've done transactions across the country. Like Chris said, I'm also an investor in the mortgage fund. I'm actually working with Chris, and we're kind of talking through some deals in Texas. I'm hoping to pick up my first investment property here. So, I believe in the time. I think it's a great time right now to invest. So I'm looking at some new construction single families at the moment. And the other side of what I do, and I know Chris does too, is we work with a lot of landlords that are looking for management, and they're just not sure like what it looks like, where to, place their management. It like Chris said, it's a big part of investing in real estate. And so those are conversations that are had by myself or Chris to really talk about what Marshall Reddick can do. And then obviously we've done a lot of sales here in the past 12 months, investment and primary residence sales.
I had a big smile on my face on that pickleball picture because I think I just beat you in a game of pickleball, which is why you were frowning a little bit.
He did. Chris had it. Chris got me on that one. Yeah, he's got a nasty left hand. And let's talk about a quick market update. December 2024. I think the biggest picture we want to paint here is this a good time to pick up your next property? Absolutely, right? But let's take a look at some factors of what we're just seeing right now in the market. So something that's interesting is you can actually get a multifamily with as low as 3.5% down going FHA. So more and more we're seeing primary residence buyers buying 2 to 4 unit properties, live in one of the units, and using the rent to help offset some of their expenses. So that's pretty cool opportunity for anyone that's interested or looking for that. Something else that's important is a lot of sellers, a lot of builders right now are paying for closing costs. They're paying for price, or they're reducing their prices, right? They're paying for interest rate buy downs, down to as low as 3.75 with 4 commitments. We'll talk about what that looks like, but that's amazing. We don't see that in the heat of the summer. That's something that's available here in the wintertime, right? Another thing that might play into it is feds are expected to announce about a quarter interest rate cut in this December meeting. Obviously, we'll see what happens here coming up, but that's going to be a huge factor to think about as well. Incentives and prices right now are a lot lower, but they're definitely going to change. So whatever you're seeing here is probably going to be higher price and less incentives as we enter towards the summertime. So I would definitely be able to capitalize on what you've got now. It's really just the best time to buy because of how desperate people are. There's a lot more inventory and less demand, and we just know that over time. We've been doing this since '79. But one trade-off I will say is, even though you have bigger price reductions and larger incentives, is, I mean, Chris and I are seeing this, slightly lower rents during the wintertime.
Yeah, definitely. And just one quick thing to add on that, not only is it a winter market, but it's an overall effect of what's been happening in the last couple of years with a recent spike in traditional conventional mortgage interest rates. Obviously, the Fed had to raise rates when we saw lots of inflation. And what that means is the folks that locked in those low interest rates on primary homes are reluctant to go back into the market and buy a new property, right? So they have a lock-in effect. They're staying in place. And that's why we're seeing 20% less transactional volume in the single family home market than years prior. So we're seeing less sales volume, less transactions overall. And for those developers that need to sell, they're in a sticky spot. They built properties when it was a low interest rate environment, and those properties are now sitting on the market a little bit. So it gives us an opportunity as investors to potentially find really good deals, and using tools like the forward commitment where we can get 3.75 potentially interest rate.
Totally.
So and Cameron's going to talk a little bit more about that. So you got two factors in your favor as an investor: the winter market and just the overall economy of higher traditional conventional rates.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And I guess just taking a look at well, where do we get our inventory, right? We're talking about these low rates inventory. Well, essentially, we are a part of the MLS, or the multiple listing service, in anywhere that we offer our brokerage services. So anywhere that we have our real estate agents, our management, we also have licenses there, and that's where we can find properties on the market. Similarly, we manage 3,000 units, and every month we have multiple owners that are looking to liquidate their real estate. They want to 1031 exchange, they want to sell, whatever the reason is. And we give our clients, our investors, first dibs on any of those properties, which is great. Sometimes they're tenant occupied. Sometimes we might be able to get a deal having it in-house. And that we've managed it and we take care of it. We place the tenant. So that's always a bonus and a plus. And then builder relationships. We work with dozens and dozens and dozens of major builders, both single family and multifamily, all throughout our markets. And the cool thing there is when you build those relationships, you kind of get to learn what their inventory is going to look like, what their incentives look like, and we get to almost partner with them. Sometimes maybe we're able to list it for them, given that we can offer our buyers this rate, or we can offer our buyers free management for a year, or these incentives. So those are things that building relationships with builder over time help our clients in the end. You want to add anything to that, Chris?
No, I think that was a great intro on how we find our deals. We pick up off-market deals all the time through just a variety of methods, and one of the ones that we get folks that are just landlords that don't want to be landlords anymore, right? And so we kind of pick up on those conversations and are able to match one landlord that wants to grow their portfolio from one landlord that wants to maybe shrink their portfolio, right? So reach out to us and maybe we'll be able to kind of match you up with another landlord and get an off-market deal for you.
Absolutely. And then I guess, why new construction, right? I know we're mentioning new construction and these inventories of builders that we have. Well, that's really where we're seeing the biggest incentives, right? There's less maintenance, one. So when you have a new construction property, I like to say there's kind of like a 1 to 10 warranty. So that's a good way of thinking about it. For the first year, pretty much everything's covered. All interior, they're going to cover everything. You've got warranties on your appliances. For the first 2 years, usually all like major plumbing and electrical is going to be covered. And then you've probably got about a 10-year exterior and foundational warranty. So that's great. As you know, there are human beings living in the house, tenants living in the house. There's going to be things that break or go wrong, and we always stack those up against the warranties for the builders to help take care of that. It helps you as a landlord cut your maintenance down. There's also a greater tenant demand for new constructions. Tenants love to be the first ones living in a new home, right? They love newer homes. They like things new in general. And so we find that the vacancy is a little bit lower on the same exact home that's going to be, brand new versus 10, 15, 20, 30 years old. That's just something that we've seen over our years of managing property. There's also more variety, right? So, builders are going to have multiple floor plans, they're going to have multiple builders, multiple communities, multiple areas, neighborhoods. So that's something that we always stack against each other. I mentioned the warranty coverage. Marshall Reddick actually just connects directly with that. So sometimes you don't even know if there's a repair done because Marshall Reddick has all of your warranty information. We've worked with the builders, so we already know they're going to cover it. We just have them come out and take care of the repairs. So that's also a little peace of mind for you as the owner. You don't have to go through the coverage for the warranty yourself. Sometimes we know how much time consuming that can be. And this is when builders are really offering incentives, right? The bottom line is builders have a lot of inventory, and for them it's a business, right? It's just a business. If you've got like a primary residence owner, they might have more time to sit on something. It might be personal reasons why they're selling. They probably have like a strict price that they want to do or not hit, right? Builders need to sell their inventory. They've got, they're borrowing private financing for construction loans, whatever that might be. They have to sell their inventory, and they've got to get creative. And if the inventory is not moving, that's when we see deals. And this is the time of year where we're seeing deals. Yeah. And that's why we're saying the end of the year is the biggest time, because they've got to hit their numbers. They've got to show their lenders that they've sold X amount of units, and this is their prices, and this is what they're offering. So it's really, really a good time.
Yeah, the only thing to add, I think you covered that really well, Cameron. I know a lot of investors in real estate, but one of them had an interesting saying, which is, I find the deals where the pain is, and the pain is in death, divorce, and debt. And no one's got more debt than a builder, right? Like the builder needs to sell property in order for them to pay their employees, meet their bottom line. If it's a publicly traded company, keep up the stock prices. They really do need to unload inventory. So for us, like, we're really pinpointing this as a huge pain point for some of these builders that got cheap land on low interest rates, were able to build, but now there's just not enough buyers for them to sell off all of their inventory. It takes time for the market to absorb that inventory. And in the meantime, we're able to really negotiate great incentives. So
absolutely. Yeah.
And I'd love to just cover some of the differences between single family versus 2 to 4 units. Those of you might be weighing up whether or not you want to buy your first single family, or maybe you want to delve into a 2 or 4 unit property for economies of scale. So we'll go over some of the pros and cons here. And everyone's got different goals and criteria, and that's really interesting. It makes our jobs interesting when we do consultations, because there's never one size fits all answer. So we'll just go over some of those pros and cons and why a single family might be better for your particular situation versus a multifamily. First of all, single family, it's going to be a little bit more affordable for the most part versus a multifamily property. And they're just a little smaller and easier to maintain. I think it's a little bit easier to chew off as your first investment property than a multifamily. Historically, appreciation has gone up higher for single family properties compared to multifamily, because it's not tied into cap rates and things like that. It's really just tied into demand from folks that want to have a roof over their head, right? Which that's like the American dream, is owning your own home. And so you as a landlord get to capitalize on that demand. And it's the most easily tradable asset because of that very fact. Folks are buying this not just purely for investment purposes, which is the case for multifamily for the most part, but for having a roof over their head, for having a place to raise their families and put their kids in good schools and access to jobs, things like that. Some of the pros here of single family, in addition to that, when you're going to list your property for sale, you're going to have a bigger buyer pool. That kind of ties into the easily tradable aspect of this. Less investment capital needed for your first purchase. This is essentially a key factor, right? You're limited on what you can buy based on how much money you have at your disposal. And you can get away with a 20-25% down payment on a single family house versus multifamily. Typically, we're seeing like 25-30 as a requirement. And then when it comes long-term to appreciation, primary residence buyers are going to get emotional about their acquisition, right? So what does that mean? It means when you're going to sell your property 10, 20 years down the line, you're going to be selling it to a primary buyer that's going to be bidding up on the home because they love that white picket fence, or they love the fact that it's on a corner lot. So there's emotional factors at play versus when you're selling a multifamily, not so much the case, right? It's just a dollars and cents kind of game. And then you might have less maintenance costs. Typically what I see with single family is that tenants stay longer term versus multifamily properties. They want to grow with their family there. So our average tenancy in a single family is closer to like 4 to 5 years, whereas a multifamily apartment, a typical tenant stays between like 2 and 3 years. And it makes up the vast majority of home sales. It really is a much more tradable asset long-term. We do want to go over a couple of property picks with you guys and just walk you through what a pro forma looks like on our website. First things first is all of these properties we can send to you guys after the call. So if you want to get into more details, we can send you this specific property, talk about the actual market this is located in. This is in the Houston suburb right next to, is it Woodland Hills, is that right?
Yeah, the Woodlands.
The Woodlands, yeah.
Yep.
So it's right next to the Woodlands, right outside of Houston. And it's a single family property. Now, what you'll notice on all of our deals on our websites, that you'll see you can determine what your return on investment is going to be. I mean, this is the key highlight here, is that we want to be transparent with the true costs of being an investor. So we go over initial repair costs, what the down payment required would be, what the closing costs are going to be specific to that market, what your mortgage payment would be with that particular down payment, and the interest rate that you'll notice is pretty conventional for investment properties, your taxes, your insurance, like all of these things are variables that need to be taken into place. Of course, we input our own management fee of 9%, which we think is very reasonable given the fact of our level of service. And the HOA fee, obviously that's unique to the specific market that you're in or specific territory. Utilities and landscaping, we have zeroed out here because we typically make the tenants responsible for landscaping. And that boils down under your fixed monthly expenses. Now, we also are going to be renting out this property. So our gross rent here is our top line number. That's $2,000. You subtract the fixed monthly expenses from your gross rents, you're left with cash flow of about $181. We also, if you want to be very specific, we want to take into account the eventuality of maintenance, the eventuality of vacancy. Now, those are going to be relatively low because vacancy, there's going to be high demand for this type of product. It's new construction, and maintenance, well, as Cameron mentioned, it's new construction. So maintenance comes with a really great warranty. And we're probably looking at a tenant that's going to be there for a few years. So very low maintenance. Overall, you're looking at a Class A, really good location in a safe suburban environment that's going to be a cash flowing single family home. So last but not least, we also take into consideration the historical appreciation of any metropolitan area where we're located, right? So Houston's got a very healthy growth rate for appreciation over like 40 years. It's right around 5%. So all of that yields you over a 15-year hold period around 16% annual return on investment, which is pretty doggone good, right? I mean, that's pretty solid.
Pretty good.
This is why people invest in single family real estate. This is one deal that we see as a really good opportunity with this particular builder. They're providing some really solid incentives for us to help facilitate a lower mortgage interest rate, getting the house rent ready with appliances included and blinds and ceiling fans and all these things that we can make sure is included in the deal for you guys as your agent working on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go to the next slide, Cameron, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job explaining that, Chris.
Yeah, and why would you might consider multifamily? Well, economies of scale is something that's pretty important to look at if you want to grow quickly. A quick example of that off the top of my head would be if I'm able to buy a 2-unit apartment building or duplex, I guess you could call it, for $400,000, that's per unit cost of $200,000, right? And maybe in that metropolitan area, in that same neighborhood, the average single family home cost is $250,000 or maybe even $300,000. So I got 2 units on a duplex for $400,000, whereas it might take $500,000 to buy 2 single families in that same neighborhood. So that's where we see the major benefit of buying duplexes is the respective costs. Now, of course, you got to come out of pocket $400,000 for one duplex, but long term, if you break it down at a per unit price, it's a little bit cheaper, generally speaking. And for the most part, there's less competition in the 2 to 4 unit space, especially that 5+ unit space where it becomes more of a commercial lending product in a commercial environment where you're not competing against primary home buyers for the most part. It's other investors, which means it's just a dollar and cents game, and there's less bidding wars for that particular asset class. And for the most part, we see higher cash flow with duplex properties and up. Now, some of the pros and cons here, I'd say there's less people seeking multifamily. Now, that's in my opinion, a benefit on the acquisition side, less competition, but when it goes onto the resale side, you have a smaller market pool when you're going to sell that particular asset. So that means, typically speaking, less appreciation long term, but you're kind of supplementing that with higher cash flow. And that higher cash flow might be more important to you right now, depending on your life goals and your stage in life, right? Cameron and I were just talking about a client of mine that is in his 70s. Cash flow is paramount to him. He's probably, not gonna live to see 30% appreciation in 25 years, right? So I think he's more focused on cash flow on his assets, and that's why we're targeting multifamily properties. Income reliability is another factor that we take into play. You have more doors, which means at 4 units, it's very unlikely that you're going to have 4 vacancies all at once, right? You're going to be able to keep 2, 3 of those incomes from 2 or 3 of those units coming in all at once when you have 1 vacancy. And when you do increase your rents, you're increasing it across your whole building. So as one rent goes up, you're able to then justify increasing the rents on your other 3 units on a 4-plex. Cameron, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I would say one thing that I could add though is maybe like when you're looking at these opportunities at like the 2 to 4 range, as we mentioned earlier, they still qualify for primary residence buyers. A little bit less as you go to 3 and 4, but we do see a lot of duplexes with primary residence buyers. I say a little more common than the others. As soon as you hit 5+, you kind of weed out, obviously,
that's gone, yeah.
all of those. So
yeah, in fact, one thing that we're starting to see is that the financing regulation and restrictions for purchasing a 2 to 4 unit as a primary residence was actually pretty strict. You had to meet debt service coverage ratios, and to make this less complicated than it really is, you had to pretty much put 20 to 25% down for a primary residence on a duplex. The federal government made that a lot less challenging. So we're now seeing buyers able to put down 5 or 10% down on a duplex, and that's a lot more attractive for a primary residence buyer. So they're now looking at duplexes as, hey, I can live in one unit, rent out the other, and only come out of pocket 5% on a $600,000 property like the one we're showing you here.
yeah,
that makes a lot more sense than coming out of pocket 25% on a $600,000 property. It's a lot lower barrier to entry then at that particular stage. So what I am seeing is when we're getting sales in these particular communities, we're seeing buyers that are seeking these out for primary residences. And what we find is that in the future, that's going to lend to higher appreciation on those 2 units, especially. Less so on 4 units, obviously, but on 2 units, I think the appreciation trend line is probably going to match single families a little bit more in line in the next few years as buyers seek out these duplexes. So,
absolutely.
This is just another great example that we wanted to bring to your attention. This is a duplex. What's really crucial to understand about buying a good duplex for appreciation and cash flow perspective is that you want each side to live like a single family. So what that means is I wouldn't recommend buying duplexes where it's 2 studios side by side, right? We want 2 3-bedrooms or 4-bedroom apartments on each side where the entries to each unit are on opposite sides of the building. So you don't have your tenants running smack into each other every day. You've got separate 2-car garages. You have divided yards with fences all around, which means that the tenants can have their dogs and whatnot in their backyard, and they're not running into each other, causing fights. It's a lot easier to manage from that perspective, but it's also from a, from an investor landlord perspective, but it also means that the tenants are more likely to stay there long term, that their length of tenancy is going to mimic a single family a lot closer if you have those aspects built into your new construction property. And we also think buying a duplex in a metropolitan area, a suburban area surrounded by single family home communities is the way to go, right? It lends to those tenants that are going to be a lot more similar to your single family home tenant than having a duplex like smack dab in the middle of the inner city or something. And this is another great property, A-class area right outside of Austin. Cameron and I have both sold a few investors these types of properties because they cash flow and they have great opportunity for appreciation, knowing that it's right outside of Austin. Anything to add on that, Cameron?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this one you might say, well, the cash flows, similar to that single family we just saw, but the return on investment is much higher. And that's just because it's on the tail end. It's like really, it's a part of the Austin market, and Austin has that high appreciation. So it's definitely a long-term appreciation play. And of course, your rents will go up every year too, as you increase both units too. But yeah, phenomenal property to look at. So I know we've thrown around a couple times forward commitments. What are forward commitments? What are forward commitments? I'd love to kind of just, I guess, to understand forward commitments, we should understand what are standard conventional lending guidelines, right? When you're an investor and you're buying an investment property, the maximum contribution a seller can give towards closing cost is 2% of the sales price, right? So let's say we've got a $500,000 purchase that limits the seller to contributing no more than $10,000, which is 2% of the sales price, right? If you have the $10,000 credit and basically a perfect FICO with 30% down on a multifamily, you might get somewhere between, about 6% to 6.25% interest rate based on what today's rates are. Without those, the scenario really looks like about 7 1/8 to 7 1/4 rates right now. It's just kind of like par rates with great credit. And so when you think about it, well, 5.99 is great, but it's not that much. It doesn't move the needle enough for me. That's what some people are saying. So some builders, they're willing to give more than the 2%, but how do they do it, right? And that's kind of where we get to a forward commitment. Easiest way to explain a forward commitment is it's a way for sellers or builders to pay more than the 2% standard guideline to buy a interest rate down, right? How does it work? Well, the best way I can explain it is, let's just say they don't give it directly to the transaction. They're working builder with the lender on the back end, right? So the builder says, hey, lender, I'm going to commit upfront to pay you X amount to offer all of my investors a 3.25% or 4.25% interest rate. What's the cost for that? Let's take a look at the trade. Let's take a look at the market. And then they kind of work that out together. So Marshall Reddick kind of helps facilitate those between us and CMG Financial, which if you guys have worked with Reed Hazard, I know many of us here know who Reed is. He's our preferred lender. They've kind of pioneered how the trade works. And you probably see on Lennar where Lennar has something similar to that. But when you think of Lennar, they're a national builder and their trades are $100 million plus, right? So how do you get that trade on a smaller scale? Well, CMG has figured out how to do that in $1 million to $5-10 million trades. So it's pretty cool. And if you have more questions on it, love to loop in Reed Hazard. He can kind of explain that, see what you qualify for, and just go into further detail. Anything else, Chris, on this?
Yeah, I think a question that I get from investors all the time is, great, a builder's offering me a really low interest rate that I couldn't get anywhere else because of your relationship with Marshall Reddick and CMG Mortgage. That's awesome. 3%, 3.75% interest rate on a duplex was the last one that I did. But why would the builder do that, right? Like, why would they lower the interest rate as opposed to lowering the price? And I think it's a very astute question. The real blunt answer here is that the builder has, especially the builders that we work with, they have long-term ties in these communities. They plan on building more properties, or they have another phase that's ready to go in that same community. And they don't want to set comps at lower prices. So they'd rather lower the interest rate than the price, right? And what we've actually done the math is that a 3.75% interest rate is more favorable for cash flow to the investor, to the landlord, than lowering the price on the property by $50,000. It makes more of a dent in your bottom line. So we found that it's kind of a win-win. The builder gets to keep a status quo pricing for their product and able to continue building properties. And as the market improves, they haven't set a deficit really on the comps in the community. And our clients are able to capture rates that, we're kind of like rewinding the clock back to 2022, 2021 with this interest rate. It's pretty amazing. So that's how I would explain it, but I think you did a fantastic job kind of getting in the inner workings of it.
Cool. And how does that play into this time of the year? Well, as builders are really trying to get rid of inventory, they want to keep their prices the same. Instead of dropping the price, rates are getting even lower. And so that's when you guys have phenomenal opportunities. So I wanted to bring up this property here in Punta Gorda, Florida, just because we're seeing that 4.25% rate, which is amazing. Like Chris mentioned, we haven't seen that in a couple of years, and you probably won't see it for a long time. So the fact that we're able to offer this rate is just going to bring the overall fixed expenses down, and your cash flow on this one specifically at a $640 purchase price is $500 a month. So that's phenomenal. These are very attractive options. I know people are kind of excited about these ones here. And so it's cool to see where those rates are taking ours. And another option is, this is a fourplex that we have. I thought this was pretty cool that they're actually buying this all the way down to a 3.75 interest rate, which is amazing, that we're having a 3.75 interest rate. I mean, if you think about it, you're probably not going to be able to refinance that any lower for a long time. And that's going to help bring that cash flow. This one also similar to the last is about 500 cash flow. So, and now you've got 4 doors, right? So it's pretty cool to see where we're at this time of year.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about a lot of new construction, and Chris kind of threw something out that I thought is really interesting. Just like when you're looking at new construction, well, what should we focus on? And we want to just give you those answers. We want to just provide you a very easy new construction cheat sheet. So really, we would recommend, if you can, be the first in the community or in the last phase of the community, right? The very beginning when builders are trying to move inventory, or the very last phase of a community when they're trying to finish out their last inventory available before they start a new project. That's when they're more likely to offer incentives, lower prices, or just anything that you want as the investor. I'd also say buy in communities that are maybe a little bit smaller. And when you say smaller, right, we're not talking about like 10, 20 homes. I mean, there are a lot of communities in that range, but we're saying between, like, don't look at communities that have 500 to 600, 700, 800 brand new properties all together.
They build them big out in Texas.
Yes.
So what seems like a medium-sized community in Texas would be a massive community in Southern California, because we don't build any new construction out here. Exactly. But like we see one house pop up, that's a brand new community for us. But I think that's a really astute point, because you don't want to see saturation, totally, especially with investors. You want to understand like how many investors are in that community. Like we don't want to run into 20 of the same looking single family homes on the market for rent within a quarter of a mile, and we're now competing with them, right? That's why we want to be in smaller communities that have less saturation with investors, so there's less competition when you need to eventually find your tenant, right? Especially like you mentioned, which is a one of the cons of buying in the winter, a small con that we think will be outweighed, but listing your property in the winter, you don't want to have 20 other properties on the market at the same time. Absolutely.
And on a macro level, be the worst player on the best team. What does that mean? Well, I would say if you can find a community where the prices are just below the average prices in the surrounding neighborhoods, maybe you have like an A-class community and you've got like a smaller size new construction community that's just under those prices, well, that's phenomenal. You're going to tack on to the appreciation of all of those A-class, luxury class properties in the area. So it's good to be in and around that too. Also, buy near good school districts. Maybe there's a university nearby. Maybe there's 10 out of 10 schools, elementary schools, middle schools. Those are going to attract really good renters, really good buyers, and overall attract more appreciation.
Yeah, definitely. I love that fact of like buying and targeting properties where you might have a $350,000 home that you're looking at, and there's a new community that's selling like hotcakes for $500,000. They're just going to lift you up when it comes to appreciation. Really. Totally. There's going to be people that really want to live in that community, and they look at your property when you do go to sell or just to rent, maybe to a tenant, they're going to say, oh, wow, you're a little bit cheaper than the next door neighbors. I think we're going to end up with your option. So yeah, certainly a good strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say if you're looking at single family, properties, the developments, I would invest in communities where a majority of the buyers are going to be primary residence owners, right? Preferably about 60, 70, 80% primary home ownership. And these are going to be placed in those communities where you have really good school districts, areas where there's a lot of job opportunities, not something that's like really far out that might be more of like an investment purchase. Because if there's too much rental activity, it doesn't create the right demand for rental growth, and you see a slightly stagnant rental market, right? Maybe the rents don't increase as much as they should. So we like seeing a good balance there. And then when you're looking at like multifamily developments, once again, invest near communities that have established single family neighborhoods, right? So for instance, a lot of the properties we're going to show you today might have a multifamily community surrounded by A-class, B-class, single family neighborhoods in a good area. And that really helps drive the values of the rents and the prices up. And when you're looking at these multifamily, you're going to want them to be a little more spaced out. You don't want them to be on top of each other and squished together. If they feel more like a home, you're going to have a renter that stays a little bit longer. So on the duplex that we showed you a little earlier in Buda, those really feel like single families, right? You walk in, you've got your own entrance on the side of the house, you've got 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and it feels like your own home, your own separated backyard. They're more likely to stay longer, and then that kind of eliminates your vacancy and brings in a little higher quality tenants. And sometimes I would maybe steer away from extremely high cash flow communities or areas, because you're going to see a lot more REIT and fund activities there. So there's going to be a lot more properties bought in bulk. A lot of, I would say you probably all seen communities where there's 20, 30 properties listed for rent at the exact same time. And then it's hard for you to get that rental price that you would be hoping for. So it's good to be in an area where there's a little bit less of that investor market and maybe a little more of that primary surrounding that.
Absolutely. I would say avoid markets where you see the Dorstead watermark. You see that's like a REIT that buys up in a lot of communities, and they buy tranches of properties at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 at a time. And they list them all at the same time. It's a lot of competition. So.
Yeah. And what's the sweet spot, right? I would say if you're looking at single families, we're looking at like 1,400, 1,800 square feet, 3 bed, 2 bath, 2 car garage. It'd be a plus to have a, 4 bed or 5 bed. But sometimes, when you're going to repaint a house, if it's 2,500 square feet, it's going to cost a lot more than 1,800 square feet. If you have a 2,500 square foot 3 bed versus an 1,800 square foot 3 bed. So that's kind of the sweet spot, and the rental price doesn't change drastically adding those extra square footage. So it really just becomes almost more of an expense over time. See if you've got, something that's going to last long. So you want shaded patios, side brick, stone, you want islands, just things that are going to be attractive to renters and aren't going to cause as much maintenance over time. And then when you're looking at multifamilies, the sweet spot's about 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. Once again, 3 bed, 2 bath, 2 car garage. It's so needed. A lot of families both have cars that they want to put in the garage, or they have storage space or whatever they're doing with it. That 2 car garage is such a bonus to keep renters for a long time and bring in quality tenants, families, especially ones with kids. It's a plus if you can get 1,500 or larger. That's going to be more of a single family type of house or duplex or multifamily. So it really helps bring in those. And I would say this is really the sweet spot.
Definitely.
So here's a single family that we've got in New Braunfels for you. If you want to just take a look, this one's going to be a little lower purchase price than what we've been seeing. This one's at about 240. We also have a slight buy down about 5.5. Not quite a forward commitment, more of like a concession there, which is great. And then your senior cash flow here is 137 a month estimated cash flow. Now the difference on this one is you only really need about 80,000 capital to purchase this one. So a little bit less, lower barrier of entry. Maybe if you're getting started, this might be a little easier to purchase.
Yeah, and I think that ties in perfectly because New Braunfels is in a kind of a suburban community right outside of San Antonio, just about like 30, 40 minutes outside of San Antonio. About an hour and a half, not even necessarily an hour and 15 minutes west of Austin. So it's kind of smack dab, perfectly situated to large metropolitan areas for close proximity of jobs. And this is why we look at suburbs first and foremost for investing, at least in this given moment, is because a lot of these new home builders are obviously building in the outlying suburbs, right? So that's what we're attacking right now as an opportunity. And why the suburbs themselves are great. It's not just because the new construction developers are there, but there's HOAs in suburbs. So these new builders, new home builders, are establishing HOAs that have dictated rules on basically how folks that are buying and renting in these communities are going to treat the property, right? So there's conformity, there's uniformity. And why is that a benefit? Well, I'll give you an example, a personal example. I own an investment property in the suburbs of San Antonio. I got a letter in the mail at my house in California where the tenant wasn't mowing the lawn fast enough. You know, the weeds were growing up a little bit too high for the HOA's liking, and it was unsightly, right? They sent me a little picture in the mail, and it was like one weed growing, and it was kind of silly. But what it allowed me to do was have the HOA was being my property manager in a sense, on top of my property manager that's already there. So I got a hold of my team, my Marshall Reddick team in San Antonio, and said, hey, can you guys just do me a quick favor and just run by the property and get a picture of it, make sure that the tenants are doing the landscaping and doing everything they need so I don't have any violations from the HOA. So the HOA and my property manager both have eyeballs on the house and keep me alerted to anything that's untoward, which I really like. I mean, it means no cars in the front lawn of your next door neighbor, which would detract when you go to sell that property or find a new set of tenants. So you want that when you're trying to attract tenants and eventual buyers for your investment properties. We talked a little bit about this already, but suburbs are going to tend to have newer housing stock versus older housing stock, which just lends itself to less maintenance over time. So if you're looking for a little bit more of a sit back and relax sort of investment situation where you're less hands-on, especially if you're investing out of state, suburban communities are the way to go. Especially in Texas, most of those are built, in the late 2000s. I think they're a little easier to analyze rent and sales pricing due to the conformity of the styles of homes. In metropolitan areas. Well, we're in close proximity to LA, and I run comps on properties in LA all the time. And man, oh man, you really need to know your street by streets, block by block, because it can change drastically by a matter of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars if you pull in a comparable property from the next two streets over. So in suburbs, a little bit easier to do that. And longer term tenants, we definitely see that in the suburbs, because folks that are moving to the suburbs, they want to escape the hustle and bustle of the inner city. They're tending to settle down, grow families or raise families. Once their kids are in that school district, man, they're not moving anytime soon, right? Like once they get into that ideal elementary school or high school and their kids on the varsity soccer team or whatever the case is, they're not leaving, they're setting in roots. So that's what you want as a landlord, in my opinion. You want good quality tenants to stay there 4, 5, 6, 7 years, where you can gradually increase the rents, but not have any vacancy or large turnover costs when you have tenants cycling in and out of your properties. In metropolitan areas, I had a condo in Chicago in the inner city, and man, oh man, like we saw a lot of turnover in that. So like every other year versus every 5 years. But what ties really into this, as we keep mentioning, every investor is going to have different criteria, whether it's suburban or metropolitan, or whether you want to buy single family or multifamily, new construction, pre-owned homes. These are the determining factors that Cameron and I ask our clients all the time, right? What is your criteria and what are your goals? And these are the questions that we think you should be asking yourself. You'll certainly have us ask you those questions, right? Yep. But you should be asking yourself right now, which is, what are you planning on doing? Do you want long-term wealth? Do you want immediate income? When are you looking to retire? What's your experience? That's a big question I like to ask, because I talk to folks that read a lot of podcasts or listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of articles and forums on bigger pockets and things like that, which is great. Educating yourself is amazing, but they see strategies like BRRRR and flipping and, biting off a $100,000 rehab on your first deal when you've never done something like that may not be the best bet. That's a lot of risk on your first deal. So that lends itself to risk tolerance. Like, what do you want to get into on your first property, and what would it mean if it didn't go right? We want you to do this again and again and again, and then expand your risk tolerance as you get further. You want to have a good experience in your first time, especially. And of course, what can you afford, and can you qualify for financing? We'll put you in touch with our preferred lender, Reed Hazard, who's just like a wealth of knowledge, not just for our clients, but for Reed and I. We sat across the desk from Reed today, and gave him a big hug because he helped me on one of my deals personally.
Yeah.
So, just a really good person to talk with, and we'll put you in touch with Reed. We do have a little bit of a scale there, which is our property classification scale. You're going to see this attached on every single property on our website, and even the PDFs that we showed you all earlier. Every property has a property class from A, B, C, and D, and even up to luxury. And we have a unique way of defining that. You're probably going to run across investors talking about property classes on different books and different websites, but we actually define it based off of the metropolitan area price for single family homes. And every metropolitan area has a different median single family home price. In LA, it's like 1.1 for a single family house, 1.1 million. When I say 1.1, that's what that is. It's mind boggling. And according to our property classification, 100% of the median single family home price in LA would put you right on the border of an A and B class property, a $1.1 million single family house. Now, when you envision, if you're in LA and Orange County, envision a $1.1 million house, it's probably not right on the beach. It's probably not in Santa Monica. It's probably in a decent suburban area with decent schools, relatively low crime, and that fits perfectly in our property class. So what I like to say to shorten this up for folks is A-class properties, those properties that are going to attract white collar tenants that are your doctors and your lawyers, your professionals that are later in their career that have families in those really low crime areas. Those properties are going to be more focused on appreciation, less on cash flow. Okay. B class properties, maybe like your middle manager folks, maybe managers of a sales managers of a car lot, car sales lot or something like that would be your B class tenant. Those are going to be a bit of both, bit of cash flow, a bit of appreciation. C class can be a little higher crime, not the best schools, but more blue collar folks, and those are going to be more focused on cash flow. D, which is like 50%, you're seeing these percentages lower as I mentioned them. A D class property, think of LA, you're looking at 50% of the median single family home price. That would be like a $600,000 house.
D is do not buy.
Yeah, D stands for don't do it or do not do it. And I can challenge you to find a $600,000 home in LA, and I'm sure you guys can imagine what that looks like. It's probably needs a ton of work. It's probably in not a good area with high crime, and you're going to attract, Section 8 tenants and folks like that. And there is a strategy in place for people to do that, but it's certainly not the one that we specialize in. It's not the one that we'd recommend if you're looking for a little appreciation, which what we think builds long-term wealth. And D definitely does not lend itself to appreciation at all, really. So that, in a nutshell, is the property classifications explained. Do you have anything to add there on your property class?
No, I think you kind of nailed it. But for those of you that are submitting questions, we'll get to those as soon as we finish the presentation. We'll kind of take all your questions and answer those one at a time. But I just want to let you guys know we do see those, and we'll get to them at the very end.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thanks for interjecting and letting them know. Yeah, we definitely want to answer some of your guys' questions. As I mentioned, you can determine the median home price, or MSA. You can actually look this up on the National Association of Realtors. They publish all of the metropolitan area pricing. Now, we talk about housing affordability in the markets that we're entrenched in, like in Texas, Florida, Tennessee. Our $1.1 million is not the B-class property in Texas. No, the average single family home price in San Antonio is around like $340,000. So a $350,000 home is an absolute A-class property in San Antonio or New Braunfels. And you can get great, B plus B class properties for $260,000, $270,000 out there. So you're going to attract really high quality tenants. I have a $240,000 property in San Antonio, and I have guys that are lieutenants in the U.S. Air Force, right? They're college educated guys, and they've been in that house for a while now, and they really maintain a great job. And it's a very cheap property. You'd never find that price of property in Southern California, obviously. And we mentioned this is a type of tenants that this is a cheat sheet that we really recommend you guys reading through. We have a book actually that's published on our website on how to look at property classifications. It's our property class ebook that's for free. We provide a lot of free education for our clients. And this little cheat sheet shows you what type of tenants you're going to attract as you go through the property classifications. And this is really crucial to understand, guys. Different property classes are going to have different associated estimated monthly expenses for maintenance and vacancy. A-class properties, those folks are going to stay there for a while. They're not going to know how to treat a property because they probably owned property in the past. Anytime I've had an A-class property, when I attract tenants, they've owned property that they're selling and moving into a new market. That seems to always happen. And like the best quality tenants because they've owned their own primary residence previously. B-class properties, a little bit higher maintenance and vacancy. As we get into C and D class, you can see that just expand and expand because it takes longer to find a property in an area with slightly higher crime, worse school systems, and those tenants tend to move out in greater frequency, which means more vacancy and more turnover costs over time.
Yeah, and as Chris mentioned earlier, you'll see on multifamily, we see the maintenance costs go up just a little bit, and so that's something to think about.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely. And this is just a calculation of how we look at vacancy. And you're going to run into vacancy, guys. Like this is just a point in fact of owning real estate. And we put that in all of our pro formas and calculate that into looking at your bottom line cash flow after your variable expenses. And here's one last little single family home where we show you guys what the expectation of your variable expenses are going to be. And this is just another great opportunity. This one is in Clarksville, which is a suburb of Nashville out in Tennessee. And this is actually offering a forward commitment. So this is a 4.75% interest rate, which is incredible, pretty killer.
We've seen several of these, even on the same street, sold recently, and they've rented actually relatively quickly. So it's been nice to see these products, new construction, builders given an incentive. So
and you'll see that we calculated for this estimated maintenance of 5% of rent. This is absolutely an A-class bordering luxury property in Clarksville. The list price here is $329. On the average single family home price is around $300 out there. So
yeah, awesome.
And just one more property for you guys to take a look at, just another cash flowing asset. And this one is going to be a little bit higher price point, but in luxury, you can still find cash flow out there, which is just another testament to why we're in different markets. Different markets offer various benefits, right?
Totally.
So we see some really healthy cash flow in the Nashville and Clarksville markets. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And if you guys want to jump on a consultation with us, we'll jump into whether or not a particular market is a better fit for your goals and criteria.
Absolutely. So why Marshall Reddick, right? What makes us stand out? Well, I guess one of the first things to say is we've been helping investors buy and sell real estate since 1979. It's our niche. It's what we've done, right? Marshall Reddick, as Chris mentioned, we've done last year about 600 investor transactions. This year about 600 total transactions, most of those being investors as well. So it's amazing to see how we've just continued the steady growth of our brokerage sales, investment sales, and knowledge in the industry, as well as we manage 3,000 properties. So it's one thing for someone to say, this is a property you should buy, this is a property you should invest in. They don't manage any properties. They can promise you any rent amount they want. They don't have to back it up. So we have to back those rents up, right? Every time we tell you this is a property, this is a pro forma on our website, well, we've probably managed or currently manage, 5, 10, 15 properties in that neighborhood, in that community. So it's so important to work with someone a property manager that also does the sales side of it. And we're also a one-stop shop. So it's very easy to transition from that buying to management. We know the property, we know the transaction, and it's not a lot of tangled up. You don't have to go do a bunch of research. We help you from start to finish. And a lot of our employees, like Chris and I, either own or aspire to own real estate. And so we don't just talk about what we're selling, we actually invest in it ourselves. We eat our own dog food is the way I like to say it. And last, just take a look at what people say. I would encourage you guys, any of our markets that you're interested in, if you want to see what people say about us, brokerage side, property management, private lending, just look us up and do the same for anyone else you're looking at. It's always good to see what people are saying online. Online reputation is extremely important, especially in nowadays where social media is so easy to just take a look at anybody and what other people say about them. So I highly recommend you look us up online, see what people say.
Yeah, and last but not least, we keep harping on this. Everyone's different. Everyone kind of requires a unique game plan. And the best way to do that is to just schedule a consultation with Kevin and myself. We're gonna ask you all to fill out a little survey after the webinar is done. Let us know what your honest feedback is of whether you learned something here or not, what questions you have, and when you're available to sit down for a consultation. Or you can just reach out to us directly, and we're going to post your contact information in just a second. But what you can expect on a consultation, well, we're going to set your goals. We're going to figure out what you're looking to accomplish, what options you have available based on your goals, what time frame we think we can accomplish that in, and then set the criteria. What type of property matches the goals that you're looking for? What type of market do we want to invest in? A cash flow market, appreciation market? Where are those markets located? And introduce you to all the key players. So the lenders, the boots on the ground real estate agents, the property management teams, the folks that facilitate this whole thing that we all rely on to have a really successful acquisition and a property that you guys can have in your portfolio for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Absolutely.
And I mean, this goes without saying, you guys are obviously on a free webinar today learning about something, but we really pride ourselves in just educating our clients. We don't charge for classes or anything like gurus. We're just here practicing real estate professionals that believe that investing in real estate is a way to unlock long-term generational wealth for our families. And this is the way we think the best way to approach it. So feel free to jump on our website, learn about 1031 exchanges and how to navigate the complicated world of insurance these days, and how to set yourself up in a trust and all that fun stuff. We have a million of articles, videos, and educational content and webinars coming on all the time. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Once again, this is our information. Please reach out to us. Let us know if you have any additional questions. We'd love to get on a call with you and kind of work things out and just, I guess, learn what your expectations and goals are and how we can help meet them. We're going to send everything to you within 24 hours via, an email containing the presentation and the slide deck. Without further ado, I'd love to kind of jump into some of these questions here. Please feel free to type all of your questions in the chat now. We'll kind of just answer those one at a time. Anything complex, we can go over in more detail on the consultation. But first one we've got, are HOAs more common now, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. I would say in the Texas, Tennessee, Florida markets, in those suburban communities, they're definitely common. The builder wants to establish that because as they're building out phases of development and people are moving in that first phase, second phase, they want it to look well maintained and uniform because they're having additional buyers come through that development. They want it to look great. And usually they're building new developments, a mile, 2 miles away on their next big development project. And they want to use those as comps. They want people to continue migrating to those areas. They do, oh my gosh, thousands of hours of research and spend tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, researching which market they're going to build in. So an HOA helps keep that maintained so that they can continue to pour money and make money in those particular areas.
Yeah, and another really good question here that I want to dive into is, can I get a forward commitment if I'm buying with private financing? That is a phenomenal
That's a
question.
great question.
Yeah,
Definitely.
You can't, unfortunately. So I really wish I could say that you could, but
there's a different route. So you can't get a forward commitment, but what the seller can do is use some of that money to put down towards buying down a rate. Because it's private financing, it's not limited to 2%. It's not technically called a forward commitment. It's not packaged in the forward commitment product. But I have worked with folks using private money financing where they've gotten, usually private money financing, if you're asking this question, you probably know this, your interest rate's not going to be par rate of 7%, right? It's maybe looking at 9, 10, 11%, right? Depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And if it's a DSCR loan, and getting complicated here, but you can get a little bit closer to par rates using the motivations of that seller, that developer, to put that money towards buying down the rate.
Absolutely. And then I guess a similar topic, this question here is, I understand the reasons for buying down rates versus lowering prices, but how does an all cash buyer truly benefit from this? And that's a great question. With the interest rates, I mean, obviously there's no benefit because you're buying in cash, but what I will say is the same way that sellers and builders are motivated, they're motivated to sell their product and they have a bottom line that they want to hit. It's a little bit harder, I will admit, it's a little bit harder to get them to lower their prices significantly, but they're definitely more willing to lower their prices for cash buyers. And so we're seeing creative incentives and a little bit lower prices now. But you have to keep in mind that for a builder, the mindset is they want to keep their property values high. So sometimes it's a little easier when you're looking at maybe just a residential seller that isn't like a big developer, but we still see incentives for cash buyers for builders all the time.
And there's other hard costs associated with acquiring properties that isn't just your interest rate on your loan, right? So for instance, you're going to have closing costs. So the developer can pay for all your closing costs. That's one way, right? And then of course, there's other things that need to be done on a new construction home to get it rent ready for tenants. In some cases, there's no sod, right? There needs to be sod laid down. There needs to be irrigation systems. There needs to be ceiling fans, refrigerators, blinds, locks change. I mean, there's a number of things that add up to thousands of dollars, if not $10,000, whatever it is, that we can negotiate if you're a cash buyer that's unrelated to the interest rate.
Totally. And going further on that too, we even see builders offering to pay for a full year of property management.
Oh yeah, that's another great
It's
example.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's like a couple $100 a month cash flow that they just put back in your pocket because property management fee's been waived for a year. They'll pay for your leasing fee, which is half of the first month's rent. So those all add up, and there's a big way. It's not all just the purchase price. So sometimes they will offer a lower purchase price, but we get creative to make sure the investment works for you as a cash buyer. And there's a lot of different, routes
Yeah, we
can go.
We can attack that in a few different ways for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if it looks like there was some questions about cash flow on here. So it's 200. One of the examples was like how much cash flow you're getting. That's $285 of cash flow per month, and it doesn't account for rent. One thing that we like to point out to clients is that our pro formas are pretty conservative. They're very conservatively written, so it doesn't account for rents increasing over time, right? So as rents tend to increase, we all know that rents tend to increase at or really above inflation, usually around like 3.5% per year nationally. In the markets that we're in, usually that rent growth is a bit higher than that. And as rents grow, you're going to see your cash flow increase. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, great point there, Chris. And I guess without further ado, we'll kind of let you guys go here. Have an amazing night. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to following up and answering more of your questions on a consultation.
Yeah, we hope you guys are able to buy some properties in 2025 and let us know how we can help.
Yeah, me too. Take care.